Hey guys, Sly here, and before we get into this video, I just want to let you guys know that this is actually a re-upload of a part of a series that I do on my Twitch channel called the Sly Army Tierlists, where we pretty much rank a bunch of just random topics that I'm personally interested in. And so, because of that, these opinions are not set in stone for how I feel about in the current day. And so if you guys want a more updated version of that, feel free to either check out the DeviantArt link down below or tune in on my Twitch that will also be in the description, or check out my Discord where I occasionally post some more updated versions of how I feel about certain topics. And so do keep that in mind. And also make sure to check out the description of the video itself for the timestamps for the particular topic that is presented here. But in any event, I hope you guys do at least enjoy. I recommend you guys listen to this as either like a podcast form or as just something to play in the background. But in any event, hope you guys at least enjoy. Hey guys, Sly here, and welcome to another episode of... Oh shoot, there's double audio, god damn it. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I don't know what that was all about. But anyways, hey guys, Sly here, and welcome back to another episode of the Sly Army Tier Lists. So, it's been a hot minute since we've done one of these. The last one we did was back in May with the Star Wars tier list. And, well, today we're going to be doing another topic that is pretty familiar, or at least should be familiar to all of you guys who probably have seen a bunch of the content that I've talked about or have played. We're in fact talking about the Tom Clancy games. So obviously we covered Call of Duty games, we covered Battlefield, we covered Halo, we even covered Total War. So naturally, I think it would be a good idea for us to also cover the games that pretty much use the name of the famous military author. So especially since, Rainbow Six is... it just by itself is a pretty big name in the FPS scene. So obviously I wanted to see if we could do this. Before we actually get into the list though, I actually do want to make a few announcements. So obviously I know I've been kind of gone for the past couple of days, but that's actually specifically because I decided to do something that I haven't thought about doing in nearly 2 years. Granted, I'm hoping I don't regret this in the future, but after 2 years of neglecting this, social media site, and considering that, there's a bunch of content that I know that my friends have made on there, I've decided to basically reopen my TikTok. I made a new TikTok, I should say. So I've got a few videos up there already. I've got a few of our old reactions to old content over here. And I've also been doing a bunch of top 5 and 10 lists. So far I've done a few emo-related tier lists. Ignore that. And yeah, I'm definitely excited to continue this. And go check that out. And again, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has supported the TikTok so far, because there's been a lot of interesting and awesome traction that I've gained already over there. And so yeah, that's why I was gone for a few days. I just wanted to make a few videos for TikTok. But yeah, I'm gonna make sure that I'm not gonna do anything that's gonna get me into fucking hot water, because unfortunately that's what happened last time, and I don't want that happening again. And also I recognize the power of a platform like that. So granted, I'm not going to be showing my face too much on there. I'm probably just going to be doing, like I said, just, typical top 10 music-related content on there and video game-related content. More in-depth top 10s will be on my YouTube channel, but for more, quick type of, content, if you guys don't want to sit through, like, a 30-minute video, then that's where you should go. I'm also re-uploading all those onto my YouTube channel, so... yeah, that's pretty exciting stuff. But yeah, go check it out. Also, sorry, just wanted to get a drink. Also, the other big announcement is, well, speaking of, my YouTube. I should hopefully have that video done by the end of next week. And so do be on the lookout for that. And more importantly, I may be on and off again throughout the next couple of weeks. I just want to prepare myself for whenever I do finally get back into classes by the end of next month. And so I'm going to be doing quite a few things between now and then. So whether it be, figuring out, how much, everything's going to cost and all that fun stuff. Obviously personal stuff. But regardless, though, I want to make sure that I'm able to have a good time with that. So do be patient with me if I don't end up streaming for a little bit. Though I do've got several streams planned for next month. So I'm excited for that, including a few new podcast episodes and, of course, a couple of tier list episodes. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. But yeah, that's pretty much about all the announcements that I've got in terms of just non-related stuff involving the tier list. Let's, of course, talk about the tier list. So I haven't done one of these in a while. So yeah, this time we are doing Tom Clancy games. So it's kind of weird. I kind of have a weird love for the Tom Clancy games, even though there's some I absolutely hate, and I don't like everything that the franchise represents, but I still respect these games specifically for a few things. So obviously, for those who don't know, the Tom Clancy line of games is basically a franchise owned by Ubisoft.
That is cringe!
Yes, I know Ubisoft has been in a lot of hot water in the past, 5 years especially, and yeah, no, they are a company that has lost their way. I mean, just look at what they tried doing with the whole NFT market, and not to mention what they tried doing last year by removing people's paid content. That is something that I will never advocate for. And considering the hot water that they just got in recently involving how they're handling old accounts, that's a whole other topic I don't want to get into, and that's really dumb. Yeah, it's kind of shameful. And unfortunately, with a lot of the later games in the Tom Clancy name, there's been a lot of duds, and that's a shame, because the thing is that the Tom Clancy name, at least in the video game world, is a pretty big one. Obviously, for those who don't know, Tom Clancy was a very prominent movie/book writer throughout much of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and he even went all the way throughout the 2000s. He's most known for The Hunt for Red October, Patriot Games, and stuff like that. A lot of Cold War and post-Cold War conflict novels, essentially. That's essentially what he did. But around the late 90s, he wanted to also kind of dabble in a little bit with video games. And considering that there really wasn't a shooter game at the time that was dedicated to being in a more grounded setting, that's what he wanted to achieve with the eponymous Rainbow Six game, which he also wrote a tie-in book, or no, the book came out first, I think, and then the game. Though the events of the game and the book are kinda loose. Regardless, though, that basically sparked a pretty big franchise. Not only just a big franchise, but also basically allowed games in general, or at least first-person shooters, to be a bit more grounded in realism, as basically every single game from before then was either just a Doom clone or a Quake clone, which I have nothing against, because you guys know how much I fucking love Doom and Quake. But Tom Clancy wanted to kind of remove that, arcadey feel. And so, of course, Rainbow Six was created, and then eventually all the other games were created. Specifically, Ghost Recon came out just a few years after, in the early 2000s. And then, of course, how could I forget about Sam Fisher's very own series, Splinter Cell? Arguably one of the best stealth franchises, or sub-franchises within a franchise, I should say, to ever pretty much grace our well, just to grace, gaming in general, and to rival even Metal Gear. So yeah, obviously you can probably tell it's more of a franchise rather than just, a series of games. Like, it's not like Call of Duty or like even Battlefield, where, they're known for just being first person shooters. It's more of an actual proper franchise where Rainbow Six is mostly first person shooters. Ghost Recon is kind of a mix between third and first person shooters. Splinter Cell is a stealth series. And then there's obviously other lines of games that were made, such as the Hawks games, which were basically sort of their response to Ace Combat, with it being a flight sim series. And then the Division games, which were basically third-person MMO FPS games that were looter shooters, that obviously they were competing with Destiny and Borderlands for. And then, of course, there was End War, which was released 15 years ago. Holy shit. Which was an RTS game. So they've pretty much dabbled in a bunch of different genres, which is kind of cool. And again, it's more of a loose narrative from what I can gather. They all do, or at least like the Rainbow Six, Splinter Cell, and Ghost Recon games, and the Hawks games, from what I can tell, all those do take place in the same universe. But just kind of in its own separate universe from like the movies and the game and the books. So this is not the Jack Ryan verse that you guys might know. This is a completely different canon. Although from what we can tell, the Division is also in its own canon, but whatever. I'm not here to tell you about Tom Clancy lore right here. But I mean, considering the fact that, a ton of anniversaries are coming up for many of the games, whether it be the 10th, 15th, or 25th anniversaries in some cases, I think it actually is a good time for us to rank this. And also, unfortunately, kind of recognize the work that the man himself did, because unfortunately he did pass away back in 2013. And while not to get political too much, you guys know I don't want to get, like, I only really go political on the podcasts. While I definitely don't agree with everything that he believed in, far from anything, honestly, I still at least respect what he brought to the table when it came to, the entertainment media. And at least with the games, I'm glad that they exist. They're not for everyone, especially not a lot of the earlier games, because the earlier games are hard as fuck. But I still respect them nonetheless. And all I gotta say is I'm glad that this helped, like, these games helped fill, like, a niche for, the whole, like, military drama thing, even though it's been bastardized by Ubisoft in more ways than one, and may or may not have helped contribute to a lot of not misinformation, but just a lot of skewed views on certain parts of the world. Although, to be fair, that tends to be the case with many military simulation games, or, military games in general. So do keep that in mind, is that, yes, I do consider myself to be a very anti-war guy, which is ironic because I play a bunch of war games. But that's because I like being able to kind of simulate that feeling of being in a situation like this, because I've always been interested in just history, if that makes sense. Which I know most of these games take place in the modern time, or in the modern setting, if not like in the near future. I just like being able to kind of like, have that feeling of being able to reenact as something that I would otherwise not. So, plus it's satisfying to, dispatch a few guys if you, had a bad day or something. So, But yeah, regardless of all that though, let's get into the actual rules for this list. There's quite a few for this time around. So rule number 1, obviously this is only going to include mainline games that have been released on PC and console. I did kind of fuck up with Phantoms because that's not really a mainline release, but I did play that. So, but there's been a ton of side releases that have been released on mobile devices. So yeah, we're not including any of those. We're not including Splinter Cell Essentials. We're not including that one Ghost Recon game that was on the DS. And no, we're not counting Elite Squad. Not only was that dead, but also, like, who cares? So we're not counting any of those. However, another thing that you have to consider about these games, and this is the second rule, is a lot of these games, whether they were on PC or console, they may have played completely different from each other. Like, for example, actually, I'm just gonna not deal with the fringe for now. I know, I'm the emo emperor and I don't have a fringe. I know, that's lame. So
You blew it.
I know, but anyways, but like a lot of the games, at least released like in the earlier years of the Tom Clancy franchise, if they had a console port, it played very differently than it did on PC. Like Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 1 and 2 on PC is a completely different beast than what they were on consoles. And even then, it depended on what console. Like Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter has 3 different versions of it itself. 3. The PC version, the Xbox 360 version, and then the PlayStation 2, Xbox Original, and GameCube version. Those are 3 completely different games. And the same thing happened with Ghost Recon 2, where the PlayStation 2 and GameCube version was completely different from the Xbox version. Or the Rainbow Six games, where the PC version of Rainbow Six plays very differently than it did on Dreamcast, which played completely differently than it did on PlayStation 1. So the way I'm going to go about this is that I'm just going to be ranking them all as a whole, or specifically what version of the game I played. So, for example, for Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, I played the PC version. Yeah, I know that I've heard that's one of the lesser versions compared to the Xbox 360 version, but I don't have that version, unfortunately, especially since that's the one that most people know about. Or, in the case of Rainbow Six 3, I know that there's the PC version, and then there's the PlayStation 2 / Xbox version. And while I did play those, I'm only going to count the PC version. So basically, if I've played multiple versions, I'm just going to default to the PC version. Unless if, like, it's not a very good PC port. But that's how we're going to rank it. Because otherwise, we would be here way longer than necessary. Because that complication already makes things annoying to rank Tom Clancy games. So do keep that in mind. Also, speaking of things that make things complicated, there were a ton of weird Xbox exclusive releases that were made. Actually, I even have a few of them. Yeah, for whatever reason, there was like an Xbox exclusivity deal back in the mid 2000s for Tom Clancy games specifically. So yeah, you have Ghost Recon 2 Summer Strike, which is an expansion for that version of Ghost Recon 2, and then Rainbow Six 3 Black Era, which is another expansion. And of course, there's other expansions that came out as well, including Rainbow Six Eagle Watch for the original game, or Desert Strike, Jungle Storm, and Island Thunder for Ghost Recon 1, and all that fun stuff. Hell, we even played an expansion for the original Splinter Cell. Just like with pretty much everything pretty much like with every other game that we've done, I'm only going to be counting, I'm counting all of those with the base game. So I'm not going to be ranking all those individually because, again, otherwise we'd be here way longer than we need to. So do keep that in mind. I know the one game. Okay, there was two separate Rainbow Six games that were released on, by themselves. I know there was the Lone Survivor game for PlayStation 1. I'm just going to count that as a part of Rogue Spear, and then Critical Hour released in 2006 for Xbox, but I'm just going to count that for Lockdown, considering that from what I've seen with the game, from what I've seen with the gameplays of both of those, they basically just they look like they play exactly like the console versions of those respective games. So do keep that in mind. And another important rule is I'm not counting international releases. So for example, Rogue Spear takedown missions in Korea, I will not be counting, as that is a South Korean exclusive game. So I have played the missions because I played a modded version of Rogue Spear that does include it, but I won't be counting that. So do keep that in mind. But last but not least, and this is the most important rule, is that this is just my personal opinion. If you disagree with me, that is completely fine. Let me know down in the comments when I do re-upload this onto YouTube, whether you agree with them or not. Or, if you disagree with me, just, share your lists on my Discord or on, wherever. Because, yeah, at the end of the day, this is just one man's opinion. But regardless, though, we've been stalling long enough. Let's actually get into the list proper. So what I was thinking of doing is, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to rank all of these based off of, the original franchise releases. So, meaning, whichever series started first, we'll rank those first, and then we'll do the ones that came out after those. So Rainbow Six was the first series of the Tom Clancy franchise that came out. So naturally, we're going to rank those first. And then we'll do Ghost Recon, and then we'll do Splinter Cell, and then we'll do the other ones. So that's how we'll rank these. So, and obviously, since we've talked about plenty of these games before, I will be very quick with the games that we've talked about. So, for example, I've already talked about most of the Rainbow Six games before on other tier lists, or I even streamed a few of them. So yeah, if I'm going to be honest, my opinions haven't actually really changed on Rainbow Six games as a whole. So when it comes to the original game, I put that in A tier. For Rogue Sphere, I put that in B tier. For Rainbow Six 3, I'm putting this shit in S tier. And then Vegas 1, C tier. Vegas 2, A tier. Siege, C tier. And then, obviously, we've got Lockdown and Extraction. Oh, God. Well, we're already at the negative, so I'm going to put Lockdown in D tier, and then we're putting Extraction in F tier. So let's start with the original game. So I'm going to make this one quick, as I've talked about this multiple times before, and I may or may not mention it in the video I'm doing. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But basically, in my opinion, this is one of the most influential and important FPS games to ever come out. This was the game that brought us not just elements of, tactical shooters that we would see, the, two-shot bullet death stuff, and, planning out different phases. But more importantly, this was the game that brought modern FPS conventions as we know it. So, aiming down sights, reloading weapons, having only 2 weapons at a time, and being set in a contemporary, more modern setting that we see in many other shooter games, whether they be tactical or not. So, without this game, ironically enough, I don't think that many of the conventions that we would see in games like Call of Duty or Battlefield or Halo would even exist, because Rainbow Six was the game that brought those conventions. And it also obviously started the tactical sub-series or sub-style of FPS games. So without this game, we wouldn't have other games like SWAT or Arma or Operation Flashpoint or any of those types of games. And that's impressive considering that this was basically built off a heavily modified version of the Quake engine. So, yeah. Granted, I don't think I put this one in S tier specifically, though, because admittedly, it is kind of hard to actually get it running nowadays. I was even trying to record this a few weeks ago for my video, and I kept dealing with a bunch of crashes every time I wanted to use this in windowed mode. And so, unfortunately, it's just one of those games that just does not like to work on modern systems. Even if you try to get support. I had to join a Discord group that was specialized in fixing old Rainbow Six games. That's how bad this can get running. But, regardless of all that though, I think it's still a fun game. And it actually is not a game that feels bullshit. Like, you actually feel like, you can learn from your mistakes. And it definitely helps that you're able to customize your loadouts and your gear in the game, which also was pretty innovative for the time. So that's why I put this in A tier. Now, I put Rogue Spear just below it because I do think it is a good addition to the Rainbow Six formula, but it really didn't change all that much. Like, it feels more like a glorified expansion rather than a fully, fledged game, if that makes sense. Obviously, things like the UI and even like smaller details were added. It was more of just a slight improvement over, base Rainbow Six. But I don't think I would say that this is one of the best shooter games of the late 90s, let alone of all time. Rainbow Six 1, I can see that argument, but for Rogue Spear, it just didn't quite do as much. I still would recommend you guys check it out, though. Especially considering that this game has 3 separate expansions, plus the takedown missions in Korea and the lone survivor thing I mentioned. So if you want a game that has a ton of content, definitely go for Rogue Spear. Because I think it has more expansions than actually any other Tom Clancy game, if I'm not mistaken, because they supported this shit throughout the early 2000s. So, yeah. It's insane. However, it's not as insane as Rainbow Six 3, specifically the PC version, Raven Shield. Oh my god, I fucking love Raven Shield. Because not only was it just a graphical overhaul of the first 2 games essentially, but more importantly, it added many other details, including the ability to arrest, individual enemies who do end up surrendering. It has better pathing for the AI, and more importantly, it basically made it to where the maps feel way more, like actual buildings. Because admittedly, with the first 2 games, yes, obviously it does feel way more contemporary than something like Quake, but it still kind of feels a bit blocky. Rainbow Six 3, on the other hand, feels way more kind of grounded. And this might sound weird, but this is actually a good plus for me. This is one of the few games where you're actually fighting, not really a terrorist group that is kind of dumb. Because in Rainbow Six 1 and in the expansions, you fight weird environmentalist terrorists, which is just kind of really dumb. I'm just gonna be frank. Granted, do keep this in mind. Most Tom Clancy games aren't really known for their story; they're more known for their gameplay. But with Rainbow Six 3, I don't have to feel as bad because these guys are pieces of shit. They're basically Neo, you know who. So
I don't know, at least for me, it's at least a nice change of pace to an already pretty good game. So I give my thumbs up to the PC version. The console versions aren't too shabby either, though I'd recommend you guys play the Xbox version so that you guys have better frame rates. Not that the PS2 version is bad, but since it's limited hardware, you give some, you take some. So yeah, Rainbow Six 3, already the height of the series, the third game in. So after I played through this, you bet I was super excited to actually get into the next game. Because damn did Rainbow Six 3 put a high bar. Oh boy, my expectations were too high. God damn it. Okay, so Lockdown. This is a game that not a lot of people talk about. Like, it's kind of a forgotten game, at least when it comes to Rainbow Six, as far as Rainbow Six games go. Unfortunately, there's good reason for that. It's because this game isn't very good. Especially the console version. If you played the console version, oh, that's easily F tier. Not even a question. Though the PC version is a bit better because you actually have the ability to, like, there's better controls. The way that the core of this game is so fucking weird because they tried to go away from the tactical shooter stuff and tried to make it more of an action shooter. Problem is, they retained the, if you get shot a certain amount of times, then you're dead thing. Yes, a game that they tried doing a Medal of Honor style of, linearity with this, but still had, the very fast time to kill in other Rainbow Six games. And what made it even worse is that because it's a tactical shooter, you can't have health packs, which is extremely flawed. Like, which is why you can't try to mix the two because otherwise it ends up failing. And guess what? This game paid the price. No one gives a shit about this game, and for good reason. So, yeah, this one was actually not. This was pretty bad. I was debating on whether or not I wanted to put this in F tier, but the reason why I didn't put it in F tier is because, like I said, the PC version, at least from my experience, is a little bit better than the console version. Like, it's at least playable, but man, is it extremely dull, even for the time. And yeah, like, it just... Oh yeah, and also doesn't help the fact that, like, the AI is way dumber in this game than they were in any of the previous Rainbow Six games. It's actually shocking. So, yeah, this was a bad... This was a bad, showcase of what the future of Rainbow Six was going to be. And because of that, people were starting to get concerned about the Vegas games. So, granted, I'm also going to make this one... Okay, so basically, long story short, Lockdown isn't a very good game. I would not recommend it. Especially not console. If you play console, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Do not play this on console. It's bad. If you want to play it, I guess you can play the PC version, but even then, why would you do that when, Rainbow Six 3 costs the same amount on Steam? I'm just saying. So, yeah, this game is bad. Thankfully, though, they didn't do quite as bad of a job as with Vegas 1. This is obviously one of the games we did stream. We did stream Rainbow Six 3 as well, but we did also stream Vegas. Though it was a step up, there was still a lot left to be desired for this type of Rainbow Six game. Because while the story itself is fine and the locations are fine, and even the things that they did change around was for the better for the more linear style and more story driven style, it's just the little things that just make this inferior compared to even the, its sequel and especially its previous games. This is a very stripped down version of other Rainbow Six games. Like, because keep in mind, you were able to control up to 8 characters. 8. In all the previous games. They reduced that to 3. And even then, you only directly control one person. And that was the same thing that happened with Lockdown. Now, obviously, to remedy this, they actually did improve some of the AI with this. And they added back in a lot of the tactical stuff, such as the different breaches that you can do, as well as different squad commands. So they brought those back. However, the biggest step back with this game is that this is the only Rainbow Six game that you cannot sprint in. I can't believe they actually removed sprint in a Rainbow Six game. You know, something that they had since 1998, may I remind you? Like,
that was his mistake.
Wow. I don't know how you do that. So, but yeah, overall, is it better than Lockdown? Yes, but not by much. That's why that's the C tier. Now, oh, and also other things like weird, the way that health works in this game is really fucking weird, because it's one of the few games that has regenerating health, which I'm fine with, but the way that they handled it is fucking dumb in this game, where like if you get shot in the head once, you're still instantly dead. It's dumb. So, yeah. I only recommend this game if you want to play Terrorist Hunt, because Terrorist Hunt is still fun. But the reason why I still wouldn't recommend this is because the sequel is basically what Vegas 1 should have been, and more importantly, it plays how you remember Vegas 1 playing. This is basically a very, very, very more polished version of Vegas 2, or Vegas 1, excuse me, but they brought back Sprint, so yeah, the thing that they removed for no reason, and more importantly, they updated the graphics so it doesn't look as, smoggy, because for whatever reason, Vegas 1 just looked very smoggy. And they added in more guns, and they improved the AI, and most important thing is they actually improved the narrative overall, and added in a lot of those, just added in just a few, it's like I said, it's a quality of life version of what Vegas 1 should have been. How they even added in all the same maps, plus obviously including some more. And Terrorist Hunt is actually really fun. And even on top of that, they added a progression system within the game. So throughout the game, you'll be constantly unlocking all these guns. So granted, that can feel a bit cheap for a lot of people, considering that every other Rainbow Six game before this, you didn't really unlock a lot of the guns. But for those who wanted to have a bit more of a reward, you had that. Plus, let's not forget the fact that the 360 version had the ability for you to, upload a custom face to your character, which, speaking of, you're able to customize your character again, because they haven't done that since Rainbow Six 3. So, yes, overall, Vegas 2, I think, if you ask me, if you want to get into the older Rainbow Six games, if you aren't interested in playing the more tactical-based games, this is the game I would recommend. I think in terms of games for anyone to start off with, this is a good start. Either this or Rainbow Six 3. So, yeah. Now, that being said, I'm going to be pissing off a bunch of people here, so let's just get this over with. Rainbow Six 3, while it's not a bad game, is just not for me. or Siege. I said Siege, right? Yes. So, yes, I know this is the most popular out of all of the Rainbow Six games. Like, more people probably know about Siege than any of these other games combined, which kind of makes me a little bit sad because I really love the older those top 4 up there are really damn good. And it's a shame that, a multiplayer online only game from a series that was more known for being a single player driven series is more known. Like, I mean, I don't hate Siege. I don't think it's the worst thing to ever come out. As a matter of fact, the last couple times I played it, I actually had a lot of fun. Especially around the time when I finally got to play as Sam Fisher, because they added him to the game, which was pretty cool. I just kind of wish that there was I just wish there were better PvE options, because the terrorist hunt / training mode that they have in the game is bare bones and very piss poor in comparison to Vegas 2's. So, I kind of wish that they would have at least kept some of the elements of Rainbow Six Patriots, the canceled Rainbow Six game that they decided to botch by 2013. I kind of wish that they would have kept at least a little bit of that. Though, from what I've seen, the Siege community is still very happy with what's going on. They're still getting constant updates to this day, and I do have to at least respect it for being another esport to compete with CSGO. So that's pretty cool. It's just not for me. That's basically it. I mean, regardless of all that, though, it's better than what they did with Quarantine. Wow. This is sad. So you guys probably remember me back in 2018 streaming the Outbreak mode that they did for Siege. And honestly, that was a genuinely really fun time. Granted, it's kind of weird that they decided to take a series that was known for establishing a more grounded setting for games and add in the more science fiction horror stuff that it was going against. That kind of goes against what Rainbow Six was doing, at least in hindsight. I mean, that being said, though, the basic concept of the game was still fine. It's your PvE alternative to Siege, where you basically go from point A to point B to point C. And there's tons of enemies you have to deal with, and you work with 2 other members to, get through the entire match. That was fine. Problem with Extraction is they didn't really go beyond that. They added a few other elements, like they brought back the permadeath mechanic that you saw in the older games, though in this game, basically, you can actually bring them back if you lose, a character. And obviously they changed the maps around and they added a few other elements, but other than tiny details like that, it's essentially the same thing as it was back in 2018, but made worse because they only had 3 maps at launch, and they literally stopped supporting the game around this time last year. Okay, not around this time last year, more like November-ish, but the fact still remains is that they cut all support from this. And that's extremely insulting, and is unfortunately another example of Ubisoft fucking up by not providing enough content at launch, and more importantly, continuing to support said game with the things that it desperately needed. Because, and also, may I remind you, they decided to make this into a separate mode. They decided to make a separate mode into a fully fledged $40 experience that they could have added as a free update to Siege. For people like me who don't like playing Siege's multiplayer all the damn time. No, we can just charge people, for a separate experience and so that they can also hopefully, buy the other characters that they probably bought on Siege a separate time. No, thank you. And again, the biggest reason why I'm putting this in F tier is that this is simply also not a Rainbow Six game. It's just not. Like I said, it's a game that literally goes against what Rainbow Six started off as, which was the antithesis to shooter games at the time. But guess what? They decided to basically just make a GTFO clone here. So, yeah, like, if you want a game like this, just go play GTFO. Or, shit, I'd even recommend Hunt Showdown. I know it's a kind of different game, but it has similar mechanics. Just go play Hunt Showdown. Like, there's no reason for you not to. But, yeah, that's kind of sad that the newest Rainbow Six game ended up being a disaster. Thankfully, it launched fine. I didn't hear anyone having, like, technical issues with the game, but holy shit, was it extremely dull. So, and uninspired. So, yeah. That's pretty sad to see, because, again, I respect Rainbow Six as a series, but man, they fucked up hard on this one. Let's just hope the next game actually, not only brings back the elements that I want from a Rainbow Six game, but also just does not fuck up hard with a co-op mode. Like, please. Like, I swear to God. Please don't fuck up the next game. Especially since we're like a few years removed from them potentially finally actually releasing a new game. Because Siege is going to be 8 years old. I don't see them supporting that game for at least a few more, like within the next couple of years. So, let's just hope for the best. So yeah, those are all the Rainbow Six games. Now let's talk Ghost Recon. So obviously the first game came out in 2001. I think it actually came out a day before or after Halo Combat Evolved. I know it came out at like near the exact same time, which is wow. But I'm gonna double check. So yeah, when did Ghost Recon come out? I know Halo 1 came out on November 17th. And then, okay, Ghost Recon came out. Okay, November 13th is when it came out. Oh, November 15th. So literally 2 days before Halo 1. Which is insane, if you ask me. So, but yeah, let's rank them. Yeah, let's rank these games. So, alright. Ghost Recon 1. This is the only game in the series that's a pure FPS game, by the way. I'm going to put this in A tier. Ghost Recon 2, though. Keep in mind, this is for the PlayStation 2 version, not the Xbox version. D tier. Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter. This is for the PC version. B tier. Advanced Warfighter 2. A tier. Future Soldier. B tier. Phantoms. So this one's kind of the exception to that, rule. From what I remember, because it no longer exists. C tier. Wildlands. Okay, I have to be careful where I put this one. B tier? And then Breakpoint D tier. Okay, so Ghost Recon 1. It really wasn't too different from the original Rainbow Six. It was basically just Rainbow Six, but outdoors. Also, it predicted the Russo-Georgian War, which is kind of awkward. Yes, this was a game that somehow predicted a real war into happening. I'm not joking. Because, Hold on, let me look up Ghost Recon 1. Yeah, the original game from the early 2000s. This game came out in 2001, and the main story of this game is a bunch of ultra-nationalists in Russia taking over Russia and whatever, and them eventually invading the country of Georgia in the year 2008. This game came out in 2001, but a simple Wikipedia search shows that in 2008, there was a war that happened between Russia and Georgia because of, yeah.
Hold up.
Yeah. This is one of the very, 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 very few instances of a video game predicting a war in the future and getting it right. Well, kind of. They didn't get the ultra-nationalist part right. And also, surprisingly, that storyline is very similar to Call of Duty 4's, but that's a whole other topic. Point is that that's kind of weird. Because, again, usually it's games that that take place in wars that take place in the past that exist. This is the only instance, if I'm not mistaken, where a game that was made before a war predicted a war that exists. Basically, it's one of the few instances of a game about a war that eventually actually happened. That's why there's those disclaimers that you see in every single Ubisoft game now, by the way. It's because of this game as to why they have to do that disclaimer. Because they don't want to fuck up again. So, and yes, this game actually takes place in 2008, by the way. The same year as that war. So, but whatever. Enough history for you guys. What about the actual game itself? Well, truth be told, if I'm just going to be frank, this is probably the best Ghost Recon game I've played thus far. Maybe Advanced Warfighter 2 is just maybe a little bit... I don't know. They're different games, though. They're very different. I don't know. Point is Ghost Recon 1 is a good game. I would recommend it. If you liked Rainbow Six, like the older games, you will love Ghost Recon. And this also goes with Desert Siege and Island Thunder as well. Those are also pretty good if you want to continue, if you want more content from this. So, easy recommendation. Unfortunately, Ubisoft decided to take and Red Storm decided to take a very different direction with Ghost Recon 2. Now, again, keep in mind, this is me ranking the PlayStation 2 version of the game. This is not about the Xbox original version. If I've played that, if I eventually get to that game, maybe my score will be different. Because I heard surprisingly very good things about that version. But I'm playing the prequel game, not the sequel game. Yes, the PlayStation 2 version is a prequel to the original. And all I've got to say is, wow, this game is bullshit. Again, tactical shooters are normally pretty hard, but you can learn from your mistakes pretty easily. That's why I think that Rainbow Six 3 is at least the pinnacle of tactical shooters, at least of its time. Because, yes, it's fucking hard, but kind of like how a lot of people feel about the Dark Souls games, you can learn from your mistakes pretty easily, and if you're able to, it is so satisfying. With Ghost Recon 2, though, it's the same problem with Lockdown, where it is a very linear experience, for the most part, where, you only get one shot. If you fuck up, you start all the way from the beginning, and what makes it even worse is that they designed this more as an arcade shooter, but with the health of a tactical shooter. That is my biggest issue with the PlayStation 2 version of this game. And I'm not even halfway done, by the way. Like, because I remember I have the game, but there's a stupid fucking tank section that I'm stuck in, where every fucking time I try everything, every fucking time that I try going through that section, like, my character instantly dies. And keep in mind, this is also another game where the previous game, you were able to swap between 6 different characters, fine, and even if one of your characters die, you can still finish the mission. It's not ideal, but at least there's that. You can't do that with Ghost Recon 2. It is very restrictive. And what makes it even worse is that, from what I've heard, later on in the game, there's missions that you have to do solo. Dear God, I don't want to know how those play. Because, it also doesn't help that the game runs like shit on PlayStation 2. Like, oh my God, it is very, very choppy on there. So yeah, no, like, I'm sorry, but, oh yeah, and also the controls are so fucking weird. That's, okay. I'm someone where it's like, if I can't get into your game because of your controls, I don't want to bother. The way that the controls work on this game are so goddamn awkward. Doesn't matter what button, like what button combos you have on your controller, it feels like jank to play. And yeah, like, a part of me actually, you know what, because of that, part of me wants to put this in F tier because of that. Because, like, I can't handle games that play like shit. Like, and again, this is not because the game is old. It's because the game is kinda not good. Because, remember, I played Star Wars Battlefront, which came out that same year, actually came out before this game, and I have a blast playing that game every time I do. Or shit. What other games do I have on there? Okay, I don't really have a lot of third-person shooters on there, but I do have the Medal of Honor games, which you can actually, you can have your own customized, button layouts in those games, which make it way more tolerable to play through. You can't really do that with the Ghost Recon 2. But so yeah, you get my point. Is, even for its time, I wouldn't really recommend it. So, the only reason you wouldn't want to play this, the only reason, is if you want, like, a proper introduction to Scott Mitchell as a character. Because I think this was his introduction, if I'm not mistaken. He may have been in one of the expansions for Ghost Recon 1, but I do know he appeared in this game. So, if you wanted some Steve Blum, there you go. Alright. Thankfully, though, Advanced Warfighter 1 is a much better game. Granted, I guess you can kind of say I did also play the 360 version of this, because from what I've heard, the PC version of Advanced Warfighter 1 and 2 are very similar to each other. Same thing with the console versions of each other. And so I kind of did technically play both, but obviously the narratives are different. And with this, I'll be talking about the PC version. So, the PC version, I'd say this is probably the most middle of the road, like, other than maybe Vegas 1, this is probably the most middle of the road game on this entire list. And part of that is because, well, this was made by a different studio. It was not made by Red Storm. That was the 360 version. And also the PlayStation 2 / Xbox original / GameCube version. Those were also made by Red Storm. They outsourced the PC version to a different company called Grin Entertainment. I don't actually remember what games they made. I know that their last couple of games were ass. But at least for Advanced Warfighter, from what I've played, it was fine. Like, it wasn't the most groundbreaking game I ever played. And trust me when I say this, I'd recommend any of the Rainbow Six games that I put above it any day of the fucking week. But it was fine. It was tolerable. I will say this though, the Mexico setting was interesting, though kind of sad considering recent events, but let's not get into that right now. But yeah, like I guess it was fine. So yeah, as a matter of fact, like the only reason why I put it in B tier is because I heard people fucking say that PC port was one of the worst things that they've ever played. I don't know if I agree with that. I've played way worse, and shit, there's even worse just Ghost Recon games in general. Obviously, Ghost Recon 2 being that for me. But yeah, it's just kind of, in terms of Ghost Recon games, it's just the most mid. So that's kind of how I feel about that. However, the real gem here was its sequel, Advanced Warfighter 2. Yeah, this game's pretty good. Granted, keep in mind, I played the PlayStation 3 version of this, which I know for a fact is the same version as the 360 version, which a lot of people love. And a lot of people would consider this to be the best Ghost Recon game. And I can definitely see why. It controls well. The terrorist hunt mode in this is actually pretty fun. And yeah, no, like it's the best sort of mix between the typical tactical shooters that you guys are known for playing, like, you know, that were known in like the earlier years of, you know, military shooters, while combining it with a lot of the more action like packed stuff that people really know modern military shooters being nowadays. And keep in mind, this came out before Call of Duty 4. It came out the same year, but just right before it. And yeah, no, as a pre-COD 4 military shooter, yeah, no, I can easily give this a recommendation. It's not perfect. Sometimes, like, I do feel like missions tend to drag on just a little bit too long. Also, admittedly, again, this goes with any most Tom Clancy games in general, but like the story isn't like that interesting. But rest assured, this is kind of how I feel about the jump from Vegas 1 to Vegas 2. Though admittedly, I prefer Vegas 2 just a little bit more. I still would give the recommendation of Advanced Warfighter 2. Also, that's a very long name for a game. Like, dude, the full official name of this is Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter 2. Like, dude, that's straight up a fucking emo album name cover name. Like, that's straight up a fucking, or like a song title. That's straight up a fucking Panic at the, okay, Panic's not an emo band, but whatever. You get the point. Is that like that's a long title. I miss those days. I miss the days of long titles for things. Why can't we bring them back? They're funny. But whatever. Advanced Warfighter 2 is good. I might actually stream it at some point. I just haven't gotten to it because I wanted to play some of the later games just to kind of ease myself in. But if I ever do get the console version of the first Advanced Warfighter, then I may or may not stream it. I don't think I'll stream the first two Ghost Recon games, though. Even though I love Ghost Recon 1, I don't think I'm going to want to touch Ghost Recon 2. So, yeah. So, obviously, you know, Advanced Warfighter 2, pretty good. Thing is it took them a while for them to come out with the next game. There was a lot of conflict of interest and a lot of just, you know, constant delays that happened throughout much of the early 2010s. Because Ghost Recon Future Soldier, I think, was supposed to come out in 2010. It was announced in 2009, but it kept getting delayed until it finally got released in 2012. Now, this is one of the games we did actually stream. And yeah, no, it's fine. I think it's pretty good. I don't think it's quite as good as Advanced Warfighter 2, but I do think it's definitely one of the better Ghost Recon games. It plays more like a Gears of War, as opposed to, what the Advanced Warfighter games are doing, which that might be a turnoff for some people. But considering that I just recently touched Gears of War, I can see what they were trying to go for. A more accessible version of what Advanced Warfighter was trying to do. And yeah, I think they did fine. Obviously, it's deeply flawed, as you guys probably saw with my playthroughs of it, including the bullshit the bullshit stealth sections in the DLC for this game. Oh my god. But yeah, no, like I still think that and also the cutscenes on the console versions are horrendous. Like, wow, this game is very ugly. This game's art direction has not aged well on console. On PC, it looks beautiful. Like, I was surprised with how amazing the game looked at times on PC. But on console, yeah, you can skip out the console versions of this game, especially since the DLC was shut down for that on console. Thankfully, you can still buy them on PC. So yeah, if I were to recommend this game, play it on PC. It's the best version of the game, and also you get all the DLC for it now. Plus, people have already made private servers for this whenever Ubisoft does decide to shut this down. So, thankfully, I would give this a tenuous thumbs up, but still a thumbs up nonetheless. So, but yeah. Alright, and then we get into Ghost Recon Phantoms. Again, this is kind of breaking the rules here, but this was, for those who don't know, this was actually a free-to-play game that they released back in 2014, kind of to tie people's, wanting of Ghost Recon between Future Soldier and Wildlands. It's weird because it kind of played, honestly, kind of a mix between the two. Though, do keep in mind, this was before I played this game before I have the current PC build that I have. So unfortunately, it was very choppy when I played it. I do remember I actually did play a couple of matches. But rest assured, this is probably the most tenuous ranking on this entire list. So do keep my ranking with a pinch of salt. But from what I do remember, it was serviceable. As a matter of fact, I think I would have actually preferred this over Siege, which I know.
Hold up.
I know. I said that. But again, keep in mind that's not really saying much, considering that I'm not really into a lot of multiplayer PvP games anymore. Though, because it kind of played like a hybrid of Future Soldiers multiplayer with the similar movement to what they would eventually do with Wildlands, I think I might have liked this a bit more if they would have actually kept up the damn servers and actually gave a shit about it. But yeah, no, unfortunately, it is a lost game to time. So you can't really play it through normal means anymore. Though I do know that there is actually at least 2 separate revival projects that are trying to see if they can try to get this game back. So good on them. If they're able to do that, that's awesome. But at least for me, if they do finally finish with that, I don't think I'll be touching this any more than maybe a couple times a year. So it was fine, but I can kind of see why they cut it, even though they should have just made it peer-to-peer, but whatever. Also, the whole, Ghosts versus Phantoms thing, god, that's such a cliche thing. It's it's a rival that's very similar to the heroes. That's such a cliche for a lot of things, but it is what it is. So yeah, that's kind of a thing. That being said, let's go to Wildlands. Honestly, I kind of really like Wildlands, if I'm going to be honest. It has its problems, yes. Like, it has very repetitive level design, and admittedly, not every single antagonist is all that interesting. But I will say this, and this is one of the few things that I will say about a Tom Clancy game. They actually made an interesting main antagonist with El Sueño as, you know, a drug cartel member who took over much of Bolivia, mostly kind of in a very Raul Menendez sort of way, where it's more a lot of stuff happened with him in the past. You know, like like a lot of his family disowned him whenever he was growing up, and he basically lost a bunch of his family like throughout the years, and so because of that, like, he feels like it's kind of his moral duty to fight against, you know, Western imperialism, and he does that partially by funding a drug cartel. And I mean, that, again, he's not the most interesting villain out there, but it's at least something, and also, you know, you can kind of see where he's coming from, which is why I think he actually is probably the best villain that Tom Clancy, like any of the Tom Clancy games, have ever come up with thus far. At least in my opinion. He is nowhere near any villain from Call of Duty or, you know, name any Metal Gear villain ever. He's never going to reach that level ever. But he was interesting enough. And I actually liked the approach that they did, at least when it came to the open world, because obviously they took a lot of cues from their previous open world games, such as Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, though with its Ghost Recon, you know, twist. So yeah, you're also able to customize your characters, which is pretty cool. You have a lot of the same, you know, command elements that you had in the Advanced Warfighter and Future Soldier games, including the sync shot from Future Soldier, which was pretty nice. And the game has tons of varied locations, and that's the best thing about this game. It's the world itself. This is a very diverse game in terms of locales. There's snowy mountains, there's giant deserts, there's an entire salt field, there's plain biomes, there's a giant lake, there's tons of forests, jungles, and swamps. Like, the world that they built with this fictionalized version of Bolivia is so cool. There may have been some weird, questionable things, especially with the story, especially since this is a very war on drug heavy game. I'm not going to get into that. But it may or may not be kind of a weird thing. Oh, and also it has the problem, a phrase that I've coined. Yeah, this is one of those games that unfortunately has a problem of what I personally call anti-socialist writing syndrome. Basically, where it's like when they have a character who is objectively correct do some fucked up shit, and now they're the antagonist. I'm not going to spoil it. If you guys want to play this yourself, I still give this a recommendation, but unfortunately it is a pattern that I've noticed that is really fucking dumb. Not to say that, like, you know, you have to agree with everything that they have to say, but, like, the fact that they actually are good guys but then automatically become bad guys is fucking dumb. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But when that happened, I thought that was kind of dumb. So yeah. But anyways, regardless of how you feel about the newer Tom Clancy games, I still think that Ghost Recon Wildlands, while it's definitely flawed, it was better than I thought it was going to be. And I mean, shit, I wouldn't actually be against playing this again. I haven't streamed this game in a long time, like since 2019, I think. So I just haven't been able to, because since this is an open world game, it would fucking lag the shit out of my computer. So yeah. So yeah, I might play this again, but yeah, it's fine. It's definitely better than fucking Breakpoint though, which all I'm going to say about this game is that it basically took all the problems with Wildlands, times them by 10, and basically made a very watered down version of everything that Wildlands was good. They tried to make this into a looter shooter, bringing cues from The Division, which only worsens the experience. It doesn't actually add anything, and only made it worse. And man, this game is, again, it just feels like a shittier version of Wildlands to me. Like, it just feels, also, like, I remember when I played this, even just on my own time, it had a lot of lag issues. Like, it just felt like every other time I entered an area, it kept stuttering. And this was even after they did all the patches. So it just felt, yeah. Granted, is this the worst game I've ever played, especially from 2019? No. But at least in my opinion, I don't even think this is even close to being the worst Ghost Recon game. But I'm putting it this low because it set a very bad trend for Ubisoft's games. Because this was the game I remember where everyone started to fucking, like, you know, that's when Ubisoft started to have this massive streak of terrible games. I know a lot of people had issue with New Dawn, but keep in mind, The Division 2 came out after that, which we'll get to later, but I actually kind of have a decent opinion about that game, and a lot of people did too. But after Breakpoint came out, they were on a fucking streak of terrible and dumb decisions. And this was the game that started that. So that's why I'm putting it in D tier. Not because of really the game itself, though that is a major part in it, but because of the dumb decisions that they did, and and I think the biggest insult to injury is the fact that they thought Ubisoft thought that they could get away with that stupid NFT scheme that they tried doing with this game. No dice. Like, we are an anti-NFT channel here. We don't accept that shit. We don't tolerate that shit. So, yeah. On principle, it's the worst Ghost Recon game. Technically wise, it's not, but on principle, it is. That's why it's on D tier. So, and like I said, if you wanted an open world Ghost Recon game, just go play Wildlands. Like, it's just the better game. Also, they actually use their space well in that game, whereas with this game, it's just too bloated of a world. So, there's that too. But yeah, that's also sad that Ghost Recon has been losing its way, just like Rainbow Six did. And that's a shame, because again, for a while, I considered Ghost Recon to be a series that didn't technically have a bad game. Well, and I was even excited about Breakpoint. Like, I remember, like, our old podcast episodes, I was hyping people up for this game. But man, not only was I let down, I was lied to. So, yeah, that's a damn shame. But yeah, let's go back to the positive, though. Let's talk about the real reason why you guys clicked on this stream. Let's talk Splinter Cell. Oh boy. I don't even know where to begin with Splinter Cell, other than this was the thing that carried the Tom Clancy name throughout the 2000s. And more importantly, I think as a whole, like, if you're looking at it through just a whole, I think this is probably the best sub-series within the Tom Clancy series, within the Tom Clancy name. And also, it's one of the best it's one of the best stealth series in gaming. So, yeah, obviously I can go on and on about how Sam Fisher is, become an icon within gaming history. I can go on and on about how this was the true narrative weight for Tom Clancy games as a whole. I go on and on about that. But what really does make Splinter Cell worth it to me is, again, the gameplay. This, obviously, I grew up with Sly Cooper. That was like my first, major game series. And while a lot of people associate it with a platformer series, I never saw any of the games as platformers. I saw them as action adventure games with, obviously, Sly's 2, 3, and 4 having a lot of stealth elements in them. Like, they were basically stealth adjacent games. But Splinter Cell was actually one of the first or how the fuck you pronounce? Basically, it was one of the first true stealth games that I've played. And man, were they all good. Okay, most of them were good. Unfortunately, there were some games that were lesser than others, but rest assured, Splinter Cell is pretty good. And you know what? Let's rank them. Splinter Cell 1, A tier. Part of me wants to put it in S tier, but I'll put it in A tier for now. Pandora Tomorrow, excuse me, B tier. But Chaos Theory, this shit's going in S tier. That shit's going in S tier. Double Agent. Ooh, that one's difficult. Okay, I might get some flack for this one, but D tier. Though I have an explanation for that one. And then Conviction, I might get flack for this one too, but I'm gonna put this in C tier. But Blacklist, fucking S tier. So, Splinter Cell, the original game. This was also another game that we've streamed, and yeah, I had a lot of fun with this game. I actually kind of regret putting this in B tier in the tier list of games that I've played, because that was the one Splinter Cell game I put on that. I think I put it in B tier. I regret putting it in B tier. I put this shit in A tier. And like I said, a part of me really wants to put this in S tier. Though part of that, the reason why I'm putting in A tier is because it's mostly just due to the fact that the PC version, while it's a really good version, the one that they have on Steam isn't really optimized. You have to do a few, tweaks in order for it to be the genuinely amazing experience. But if you can get it set up, then yeah, no, it's S tier. Oh, okay. Okay, but that's a small thing, though. Ooh. Okay, you know what? Fuck it. I'm putting it in S tier. This game's great. Though, keep in mind, it's not as good as Chaos Theory or Blacklist. But anyways, basically to, cut it short, Splinter Cell 1 is one of the prime examples of how you do stealth correctly. Not like Hitman 1, because Hitman 1 is just a bad stealth game. Don't even fucking tell me otherwise. Thief and Metal Gear Solid were better than that game. But thankfully, Splinter Cell is also genuinely really good. And also surprisingly kind of fucking dark. Yeah, there were some moments that not only did I forget about, but more importantly, damn, man, they went there. I'm not gonna spoil it. Go watch my playthrough or play it yourself. But yeah, no, this is, in my opinion, one of the best introductions to a stealth franchise. So, yeah, go play it. Pandora Tomorrow, unfortunately, to be fair, this was the only game that I didn't really play it on PC. I played the console version of it. And this was actually the first Splinter Cell game I've ever actually played. Yeah, we had this version. I remember we had this a long time ago. We got it around 2006-ish, I think. Obviously for, my Guardians. But we got rid of it after a couple of years, but I finally got it back 10 years later at, well, not the same exact copy, obviously, but just I got the game back 10 years later, and I played through it, and while, yeah, it's still fun, it can be frustrating. Keep in mind, I'm talking about the console version of this game as well. So if I find a PC version of this, or if I find a PC copy of this, then maybe it will be A tier, maybe even S tier, because it plays almost identical to Splinter Cell 1. It's just the problem is that it's a bit more janky. Like, there's a lot more just weird stuff that happens where, like, maybe it seems like you'll be, like, spotted. If you're in, like, a shadowy area, somehow guards still see you, even if you're, like, far away. Or there's some, like, weird audio cues, especially on the PS3 version, which that's annoying as hell. And there's even some weird, like, jumps in difficulty that are fucking annoying. Even more so than Splinter Cell 1. And yeah, and also alarms work kind of weird in this game, where it's like, you know, no matter if you get spotted or not, an instant alarm happens, but over time that dissipates. But it's, I don't know. And also the cutscenes are fucking weird. Like, God. Oh yeah, and let me remind you of this, like, every other voice actor besides Michael Ironside as Sam Fisher was replaced specifically for this game, and this is the only game that's done that for all those characters. It's kind of weird. So, thankfully though, Spies vs. Mercs was fun as hell to play. That was the multiplayer of the Splinter Cell games. It got its introduction here, and oh my god, was it really fun. Though I mostly played the double agent version, though from what I've seen, very similar. Oh, and also Blacklist. Very similar throughout. So, regardless, that shit was fun. So, yeah. So yeah, Pandora tomorrow. I think I can still give the recommendation, but it's a hard recommendation. It also doesn't help that it's the only Splinter Cell game that's not available digitally on PC anymore. For whatever reason. God damn it, Ubisoft, just fucking give us the goddamn game on Steam, please. But anyways, all sins were forgiven with that game because of motherfucking Chaos Theory. This fucking game. Honestly, you know what? Fuck it. Like, I'm just gonna be frank. This is the best Tom Clancy game to have ever been made. Period. Like, you want to talk about political thrillers, you want to talk about stealth games, you want to talk about, you know, games that use dark themes, you know, justifiably. You want to talk about games that honestly have contender to being one of the best games of all time. Go play fucking Chaos Theory if you want a genuinely really good game. Like, I can't really give justice to talking about this, or really just any of the Splinter Cell games. Go watch Critical Nobody's review on all of the Splinter Cell games if you guys want, you know, a better understanding on why all these games are pretty good. Like, because admittedly, like, yes, I've played all the games. I have all the games on Steam, and I obviously have a bunch of the console versions as well. But, like, they give the best justifications for why these are some of the best games of all time. And yeah, Chaos Theory delivers on that. And also it actually ties in with the story of Ghost Recon 2. Yay. But whatever. Thankfully they actually make that conflict way more interesting in this game. And more importantly, all the things that you can do in this game, including the 100% stealthing of an entire mission. It's such a blast. Oh, and also co-op is pretty fun. I played it once and it was really fun. So yeah, go play Chaos Theory. If you want to take anything from this list, regardless if you're a fan of FPS games or third-person shooter or stealth games or whatever, if there is one game that I have to recommend to all of you guys on this list, it would be Chaos Theory. Rainbow Six 3 is right up there as well, but that's only for people who want to play first-person shooters and tactical shooters. I know it may not be for everyone, but for Chaos Theory, that's the game you should play. So, go out and play it. That being said, though, you can probably already tell where the next game is going. And it kind of pains me to say that because I don't hate this game, but man, the PC version was botched. So, Double Agent. Again, this is kind of a weird score. And truth be told, I haven't played this game in a while, and so maybe I just had a very, very bad experience, and maybe I didn't do all the proper, patches that I needed to do. Maybe it was just a Splinter Cell 1 situation. But I don't know, man. Double Agent, whenever I played it, I really did not click with it. Even though it played, not exactly, but very similarly to Chaos Theory. It controlled near exactly the same. It just played differently, but the way that they did it was God. So, a lot of it... okay, basically, my biggest issue with Double Agent is that this was the first game that didn't really feel like a Splinter Cell game. You definitely had Splinter Cell moments within the game, obviously the opening mission, the mission on the ship, stuff like that. But you're way more in the open in this game. Or at least it feels like you're in the open a lot more. And I don't know, it just never really clicked with me. And also, it didn't help that there were weird, juxtaposition action moments that you have to do before you fucking die. For example, when you're falling down the fucking sky and your chute doesn't pull through, or when you're almost about to crash with a helicopter. Shit like that was so weird. I don't know what they were trying to do with that, but it was something that I never really cared for, and also just got really annoying. More importantly, there's no proper HUD that indicates how stealthy you are. Because again, this was a game from the 7th gen era, which had this weird thing of lessening the amount of HUD things you have on the screen in favor of more cinematic stuff. Think games like Dead Space, for example. When we played that, the HUD was tied to the back of Isaac Clarke's character. It wasn't actually a physical thing on screen. They tried doing that with this game, except with the stealth. And man, is it really dumb, because it's just a light. Green if you're hidden, yellow if you're exposed, and red is when you're in danger. Compare that to the stealth meter of the previous games, and it just does not feel well to use. However, the biggest sin this game commits, and this is a hot take for me, so don't take this as something as, gospel for me. But man, I fucking hated the HQ missions. Oh my god, were those fucking annoying to play through. Because the whole point is that you're a double agent throughout the game. So you're helping a group called the JBA, and you're basically going undercover. And you have to do a certain amount of missions for each side. If you lower the NSAs, then yes, you work with the NSA, I know. Hardy har har. If you lower that all the way down to 0, game over. If you lower that to the JBA, if you lower that trust all the way to 0 for the JBA, it's game over as well. And I've always found that to be such an annoying mechanic. And those are either made or break, or you either make or break those in those sections. Especially since those are sections that have a time limit. You guys know I fucking hate time limits. So yeah, and it doesn't help that you have to be very fucking precise of when you go through certain parts of the entire map to do objectives. Because if you fuck up once, that's it. Thankfully you have quick saves, so it's not as annoying, but oh my god, I hated those sections. And considering that there's 4 in the game, that killed the mood for me. So that's why it's at D tier. It's not because the game itself is bad. As a matter of fact, I'd rather play this over, honestly, any of the games that are on the rest of D tier. And you can probably convince me that it's more of a C tier game. But, oh my god, that fucking sucked. And it didn't help that the PC version was compromised. Constant crashes. Every time I loaded into another level. So, yeah, like that's a very unpopular opinion for people. Typically, people would say that Conviction is the worst game. But for me, it's Double Agent. Which, speaking of Conviction, I put that in C tier. I do not hate Conviction, like many people do. I think that the game itself is fine. It at least is playable, and during the actual stealth sections, it can be fun, though there's more stealth in the co-op missions rather than the actual single player. But it's not a Splinter Cell game. It's just not a Splinter Cell game. Like, it's a third-person shooter action-adventure. Like, honestly, it's weird, too, because, like, Sam Fisher in this game looks more like Nathan Drake, or shit, even fucking Vladimir Makarov from Call of Duty than he does Sam Fisher. Though, part of that is because the story in this game directly ties in with the story with Double Agent. I'm not going to spoil it, but all I'm going to say is that a lot of the plot contrivances are very fucking dumb in this game. Like, oh my god, they're fucking stupid. And it doesn't really help the fact that, like I said, this plays more like a typical third-person shooter, like Uncharted or something, than it does a Splinter Cell game. That's not a bad thing. I think the shooting itself is fine. However, the biggest sin that this game commits, though, is that the campaign is only 4 to 5 hours. Actually, no, 3 to 4 hours. I remember I beat this shit in like 3.5 hours, if I'm not mistaken. My first playthrough. Where's the fucking thing? Yeah. Compared to like the 9 to 10 hours my first playthrough with Splinter Cell. Granted, I've obviously gotten faster with that game, but the fact still remains, this is the shortest Splinter Cell game to date. And wow. That's insulting. It also doesn't help that they replaced Spies vs. Mercs with a really dumb multiplayer. Thankfully, I never played it, but from what I've seen, it looked really bad. So, yeah, like, this game, while it's not a bad game, it's just not a Splinter Cell game. Though, because of the way that it controls, but also because of, it doesn't have as many annoying sections for me. I do prefer it over Double Agent, but keep in mind, that doesn't necessarily mean I think this is the best. I don't think maybe if I play Double Agent again, maybe my mind will change. But holy shit, man. Like, God, this is probably one of the most mid games, for sure. Like, that we can at least agree on. This game is pretty fucking mid. Which is why it's in C tier. So, thankfully though, Blacklist was made up for the bullshit that they were doing the previous 2 games, and honestly, not only do I think it's one of the best Splinter Cell games, I think it's actually, again, contender for being one of the best games in this entire list. The only issue is that this is the only Splinter Cell game that does not feature Michael Ironside as Sam. Granted, I know why. It's because he was battling cancer at the time, which I have nothing but respect for him. I'm hoping he's doing good. Though, it's kind of weird that the developers didn't, at the very least, try to make another character out of this instead of just using Sam again. Because there's other Splinter Cells that are in Splinter Cell that's been confirmed since Pandora Tomorrow. So, like, it would have been fine if they would have had a different character instead, but whatever. At the end of the day, though, this is still, in my opinion, one of the best games on this list. Like, I can't wait until I actually finally get the chance to play this for you guys, because holy shit, I fucking love this game. Because, yeah, and it sucks too, because this game is kind of forgotten about. Like, yeah, because this came out at the very tail end of 7th gen consoles. Like, like PlayStation 4 and Xbox One were just right around the corner when this game came out. Because this came out in August of 2013, which, yes, that does mean this will have a 10th anniversary very soon, which is cool, but man, like, this game just got overshadowed. It's like Sly 4. That game got overshadowed hard because new consoles were right around the corner. And yeah, like, that sucks, because this is a genuinely really good game. It's a good stealth game, it's a good third-person shooter, and, again, like with Chaos Theory, it has a really damn good story. And before the server shut down, I remember I played Spies vs. Mercs, and I even played co-op, and those were really fun too. And, you know, considering that this is also the game that has the most diverse locales, like, you go all over the world here. You go not just the US, but you also go to, you know, Latin America, you go to the Middle East, go to Europe, you go to Africa, you go to, you know, East Asia here, you go to Russia, India, like, you go to so many places. And you can't really say that for many other games on this list other than, like, the older Rainbow Six games. But again, those games are already getting so old that people may not want to go to those. But Blacklist, since it's a bit newer, yeah, it's 10 years old, but it still looks really damn good. Yeah, no, this is another easy recommendation, like, from me. Plus, it has the most tools, both offensive and stealth-wise, in the entire series. So if you wanted to have, like, you know, lethal or non-lethal crossbows, if you wanted to have a lot of silenced weapons, if you want to have a lot of proximity mines, or, you know, a drone that you can use, Blacklist is your go-to game in the stealth department. And yeah, unfortunately though, it's also the last Splinter Cell game. There has not been another Splinter Cell game made since. It is another franchise that has just been dormant, and that makes me very sad. Like, yeah, I know. Like, it's sad because, I mean, I know that, like, there were a ton of rumors that a new Splinter Cell was being made. Shit, they even teased a VR Splinter Cell game at one point, but I think the fact remains is that I don't think they're gonna make another Splinter Cell game. Like, they might, but the chances of that is going slimmer and slimmer. And unfortunately, it's another situation of a game series where a lot of people are asking for a new game, just like with Sly Cooper. There's been thousands of people who, you know, cried out for Ubisoft to make a new Splinter Cell game, but they just haven't. And that's sad, because, like, at least one more game with Michael Ironside for a last hurrah. You know? Because especially since he's getting pretty old, and even Sam Fisher as a character has gotten pretty old in the series. Like, you gotta at least give him a last hurrah. Like, if Prince of Persia can get a comeback, then Splinter Cell can definitely get a comeback. So, let's just hope for the best of that, though. Alright, so yeah, like, overall, though, you can probably already see, but, like, Splinter Cell, I'd say, as a whole, overall has the best quality. But we are not done with the list. We've got 5 more games to go through, and those are all the miscellaneous games. So, End War, the Hawks games, and the Division games. So, yeah, End War, I'll put that in low C. Hawks, I'll put that in C as well. Hawks 2, B tier. And then the Division, C tier. And then Division 2 B tier. So, I mean, I don't really have much to say about these games. I have played them, but they're kind of weird. So, End War. This game came out in 2008. Also another anniversary, I know. And again, may I remind you that Rainbow Six 3 had an anniversary this year, as well as the original Rainbow Six. Rainbow Six 3, Rainbow Six Raven Shield, Rainbow Six 1, Rainbow Six 3 Raven Shield, Rainbow Six Vegas 2, Tom Clancy's End War, Splinter Cell Blacklist. God, all these games are getting old. But, okay. But yeah, End War, that was the RTS game I mentioned before. It takes place in an alternate 2020. Hardy har har. Where we go to World War III. I'm so glad this did not end up happening, because if you guys remember, in very early 2020, that almost happened. So, thankfully, that prediction was wrong. However, with End War, it takes place in it takes place in the year 2020, where the U.S. goes to war with Russia. But more importantly, there's also a third factor: Europe, where you got the United States of Europe now. There's basically just an evolved EU. They also go to war with both countries for whatever reason. I don't know. Who fucking knows why? And, well, it's not the worst thing ever played, but the way that it controls is so awkward, because it's not a traditional RTS. Basically, you call in troops. But yeah, basically the gameplay is that you actually call in troops within a given battle, but you only get a certain amount of troops per how many nodes you're able to capture on the map. So if you run out of those points from the nodes, then you lose all your troops, you lose the game. There's also a version of the campaign that has like an overhead, which kind of acts as like a kind of galactic conquest sort of thing. Or I don't like calling it a Total War thing, because it's nothing like Total War. But it's kind of more of just a selectionary thing where you can take certain battlefields. I mean, and that's basically it. Like, there's really not much else to it, though you can actually use your voice for giving commands to certain units, which that part is pretty cool. And there's even a ton of references to all the other Tom Clancy media within this game. So yeah, you have Rainbow Six as a unit for the European faction, you have Ghost Recon as a unit for the American faction, and there's a lot of references to Echelon from Splinter Cell. So yeah, this was the first big crossover game for all three of the major Tom Clancy game series up until that point. But admittedly, like I said, it's kind of your below average RTS. I don't think I would really recommend it, if I'm going to be honest. I've played way better RTS games even games that kind of do this in a similar thing, but do it way better. They're called Total War. Just go play Total War. So, but yeah, in concept, this game probably would have worked, but it just needed to be fleshed out better. Unfortunately, well, there hasn't been a sequel to it ever since, so, and there never will be. So, Ubisoft kind of wants you to forget that this game exists. So, which isn't completely unjustified, but it's a bit upsetting that that's the case. Now we talk about the Hawks games. So, like I said earlier, these are actually flight sim games. So, more in vein to Ace Combat. As a matter of fact, very similar to Ace Combat. Though a bit more grounded, of course, since it's a Tom Clancy game. I mean, the only reason why I put Hawks 2 just above is because Hawks 1 is kind of boring. With Hawks 2, they add a few more things, and you actually switch perspectives from the American pilot that you play in the first game. You get to play as an American, a British, and a Russian fighter, crew in Hawks 2. And it's just a more quality of life improvement of the first Hawks. So, also, you can actually play Hawks 2 right, like, from the get-go without having to play the first game. So, if I were to recommend them, I guess I would recommend Hawks 2, especially if you want to start somewhere in, like, the flight sim thing. Unfortunately, just like with Pandora Tomorrow, and also the PC versions of the Advanced Warfighter games, these games were removed from Steam. So, yeah, you're gonna have to do what I did and seek out physical copies of said games for PC, which is annoying. Really fucking annoying. Ubisoft, stop taking away your games from Steam. Like, people want to play these games. So, but it is what it is. And then last but not least, we've got The Division and Division 2. Obviously, I've streamed the Division 1 before. I don't think I've streamed Division 2, but I definitely streamed Division 1 in the past. All I gotta really say is actually the same exact things I said about Hawks. Is that the Division 1 is a very flawed looter shooter that, in concept, is actually kind of cool, but I just kind of wish it was more developed, if that makes sense. Thankfully, they did that with the Division 2. They not only did they change setting, but they added a few more, story elements that made things more interesting. And I do like the fact that they have more, PvP areas, and they have, better level design and all that fun stuff. Again, I am being a little bit short with the Division 2 since I haven't played it as much as the Division 1. And I'm being short with the Division 1 because I've already talked about that game before. Basically, I do like it more than most people, but do keep in mind that it's not great. So, it's pretty average. And I did play the DLC, and they're just kind of whatever. So, but yeah, that's kind of how I feel about the Division games. And yeah, surprisingly enough, that is also the end of the list. I know we did go a little bit faster than usual, but again, keep in mind is that we've already talked about plenty of these games before. So, like, if you guys want my thorough opinions on plenty of these, go watch my other tier lists. But yeah, we got the Tom Clancy game tier list done. So that's pretty nice. And again, we ended on a weird positive with the Division 2 right there, thankfully enough. And yes, obviously, there's some stinkers when it comes to Tom Clancy games, but when the games get good, especially Splinter Cell, they get really damn good. And I guess it's just overall me showcasing to you guys just another series of, military-related games. As someone who isn't really that big into war, basically just show you that, like, yes, even though I'm very much an advocate against, things like military intervention and, big global conflicts and all that, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm not interested in that type of stuff, because military history and technology is something I've always been kind of interested about, because that stuff has impacted human history. And that's why I still play games like Call of Duty and Battlefield. It's because I like being able to simulate that without actually experiencing it in real life, because that's one of the last things I would want to ever do in my life, is to be in an actual conflict. And while sometimes the stories and, gameplay quirks can be a bit odd with a lot of these Tom Clancy games, I'm just glad that these games exist, because the Tom Clancy name was really the first basically the first modern series on which we think of when it comes to, military games as we know them. Whether for better or for worse, you have to at least give, credit where credit is due with that. And like I said, even though I may not have agreed with everything that Tom Clancy himself has believed in, and even what he put into, writing, I gotta at least give the late author some props for influencing not just, video games, but also just the medium that we like, media as we know it. And that's something I can't take away. So let's just hope that Ubisoft does not keep, fucking up this franchise, because Division Heartland looks like it's probably going to be another dud, and that's sad, because they've been using his name a decade even after he died. So let's just hope that at some point that's going to turn around. And hopefully that will be for the better. But regardless of all that, though, that's going to be it for tonight. We got another tier list done. And again, like I said, I will make sure that I will be doing more, I'll be making sure that, streams overall are still going to be done. It's just, again, I just wanted to, prepare myself for other things that I'll be doing in the background. But yeah, regardless, though, that's going to be it for tonight. I hope you guys did enjoy this. If you guys did, if you guys are watching this on Twitch, make sure to hit that follow button down below and turn the bell icon so that you'll be notified exactly while I'm streaming. And check out the links down below. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so that you'll be notified exactly when the next video will be uploaded. And of course, check out the links down below, Discord, SoundCloud. And again, I just reopened a TikTok account, so feel free to check that out as well. And if you guys are also watching on Twitch, hit that subscribe button over there, as it directly supports me. If you can't necessarily do that, that's completely fine. I'm just glad that you guys took time to watch this. And again, I think I set up a Patreon. If you guys want to, you can check that out. If you can't, that is completely fine. I will make sure that I will have goals set up for that at some point in the future. But regardless, though, I hope you guys enjoyed this list, and I hope you guys stay tuned for the next one. Until then, I'll see you guys later. Bye!